the 20th century, if you had something to say in public, you couldn't, period. Right? If you were a civilian, if you were a citizen but not a media professional, you could not broadcast a message, no matter how hard you tried. In fact, people who went out of their way to try to get messages out in public through amateur channels, right, holding up signs on the street or, by the roadside, were widely regarded as being kind of off their rockers. And that change is enormous, that anyone who wants to participate, has at least the means to participate, is a huge change.
So very fast, from a world where we have this beautiful internet that connects us all globally, where every human that connects to the internet is the same as another human being that is connected, has the same voice, the same importance, the same possibility to spread the word to everyone else, where all these things that we take for granted, that we have experienced within the internet, where all these things from one day to the other can cease to exist, basically, just because the regulation has been introduced in the wrong way, because we have not protected us, but we have rather given someone the right to control us or to police us. Well, WikiLeaks is an internet platform. It's a platform that was created to publish documents that are in the interest of the public. So primarily we focus on documents that are not supposed to be published, but that because they are in the interest of the public need to be published.
It's not, I remember when I was elected to the European Parliament and I had to switch offices and I went to a computer, I went to a new office and there was no computer in the office, and I said, well, why is there no computer? I said, well, the previous person didn't have a computer, a very prominent European politician. I said, well, how does this work? No computer? Well, the secretary would, print out all emails, and I said, oh, and what about his letters? Well, he would dictate to the secretary. It's sort of 1930s style of doing things, and it's changed.
But that was before Facebook and Instagram and Twitter allowed politicians to speak directly to voters. Before that, they had to go through these traditional media gatekeepers, like 60 Minutes and Meet the Press and all the Sunday shows. And those were impossible to book unless you had connections.
On the other hand, we do see an interesting spiral effect that shows up. When something becomes popular on the internet, it often spreads very, very quickly. We saw this happen with YouTube, for instance. It started out as a very small operation with a couple of guys that wanted to help people upload video. Now I'm told that 23 hours of video are uploaded per minute into the YouTube system, and I have no idea how many hours per minute are being watched by everybody else. But the same sorts of phenomena show up, and you see a kind of rapid spiral. Twitter is another example of that. Once an idea gets popular on the net, it grows very quickly because it's so easy to get access to those new applications. And that's probably one of the most important aspects of the internet. It's easy for people to get access to new applications. Google believes that, and I believe, that platforms, the internet, mobiles, and others, should be as open as possible to allow exactly that phenomenon to exist.
I think the internet empowers anyone who can use it, and it empowers the people who can use it most effectively even more. It can empower a government to repress an insurrection. It can empower the insurrection itself. The BBC played a great role in the Second World War in occupied countries.
I think that everyone will benefit from the spread of transparency, immediacy, and accountability through the web. I think these are forces definitely for good. And that's why so many totalitarian regimes are resisting them and doing everything they can, and sometimes it's pretty complicated, to block the free flow of information on the internet.
So the web is really good at factionalization and special interests and empowering people to have incredibly loud arguments all hours of the day and night. But it's not at all good at figuring out of the massive signal that argument generates what any group of people should do. And that's because that second thing isn't a technological problem. So the technology's enabled this incredible conversation, but the kinds of tools that allow you to look at that conversation and say, this part we're going to take as advice for the government, and that part we're going to regard as the conversation that led to the advice, but we're not going to act on. You know, to decide between deliberation and decision, you can't have a technological solution for that. And we don't yet have the political overlay that says this newly broadened and crazily fractious public sphere is also going to become politically critical in ways that, you know, we accord to voting or jury duty or any of the other kinds of you know, formal government mechanisms we're used to.
Look at Beto O'Rourke. He's documented almost every moment of his campaign on social media, and it's introduced him to millions of Americans and helped him to raise an unprecedented $40 million in 3 months. But beyond campaigns, social media has made government more transparent. Who would have thought our 72-year-old president would get every member of Congress to use Twitter? But every time he tweets, the traditional media come asking for a response. So the need for conviction, authenticity, responsiveness, are now requirements of elected officials. Because if you don't respond, you're seen as totally out of touch.
Look what happened in Iran. You had this groundswell of popular support expressed on Twitter, for example, and through blogs. It was just crushed. And the regime, Ahmadinejad, began using Twitter against his opponents very effectively, spreading horrendous lies and misinformation, bites of misinformation by the thousands. So again, it's a double-edged sword. There'll be hierarchies, there'll be elites, because we live in a democratic, vigorous society. There will be many doors open to people. Democracy, the democratic vitality will still rule American culture, but there will be the same restrictions, the same exclusive niches that there have always been. There may be more, there may be fewer of them. That remains to be seen. I'm sure that the internet will look nothing like it looks like now, nothing like it is now.
There are all sorts of people who see the internet as a threat and who want to control it using whichever excuse will work in the politics of the day. Ultimately, I think this is vain because the world is just becoming so connected that in Western countries, there's nowhere you can put the censorship anymore. That networks are too dense, flows of information are too great, that censorship is basically a lost battle.
Some people might worry that there's too much freedom to individuals using the internet, that somehow governments will disappear because people will be able to do whatever they want to. I don't think that's a likely outcome, frankly. The internet exists in the real world. It exists in a society that we all inhabit, or multiple societies, multiple cultures. It's absolutely essential to understand that the internet and the notion of cyberspace is not divorced from the real world. We live in the real world, the internet lives in the real world. Our interactions with each other are not in some fictitious, strange planet somewhere else. They are part of the world we live in. It's essential that we live in a world of law, because anarchy is not a good path for civilization to pursue. I don't think the internet will contribute to anarchy. I think it will contribute to collaborative development of our civilization.
Social media has created a dialogue that's never existed between elected officials and those they represent. It's opened the door for people who thought they could never run, and it's served as a microphone for those who've never had one. Most importantly, it's changing the face of politics. Maybe it could even change those faces on Mount Rushmore.
Everyone who is trying to pursue his interest on the internet is a threat to the internet. Just because within the internet you don't have these kind of interests. You are the same as I am, and my provider gives me access in the same way that you are getting access on the remote end of the world. It's a protocol. It's the internet protocol that people have agreed upon. It's the same thing as I know when I'm dialing +44 on the phone, I'm getting a connection to the UK. So I don't have to worry that my provider now is doing something different with +44 or introduces, I don't know, advertisement when I'm trying to dial a foreign number. So in the same way, we have to make sure that the internet stays neutral, that it will just be a transport mechanism in the same way as we have postal mail or the telephone.
We're talking about social change and political change and economic change in a way that was never possible before. And I think that that's something that we should embrace, and that we should look at what are the ways that we're going to make it the best of what people can be, as opposed to the worst of what people can be. Here in the United States, T. Boone Pickens, who has been a big oil entrepreneur over the years, is passionate about wind energy. Over 200,000 organizers across 91% of the congressional districts in the United States have come together in a social activism network and changed the course of wind energy policy in the United States. The same exact foundation, the same exact technology is being used for people to express themselves around their tricked out cars on Dub Pages, which is a social network on Ning for people who love to trick out their cars. So as people are actually learning how to use social technologies, they are using them in all sorts of ways. So of course, social technology is going to have a massive impact in terms of how people organize politically, what they do economically, and how they express themselves as being unique individuals in a social way. So I actually think and really look at it as the skills people are learning across all of these facets of the world. It's not a surprise that they're using them for political activism. And I think that the part about it that is just amazing is the fact that it is global. So we now have tools. I mean, 25 years ago, we didn't have a way to impact the world in one single instant. Today we do, and it's through the internet.
The web is pleasure, vexation, thrill, annoyance, oppression, exhilaration. The web, like any piece of technology, is an amplification of human nature, of every aspect of human nature.
The web's democratic in one way and distinctly undemocratic in another way, and I think a lot of the confusion about the political ramifications have to do with that one word having so many meanings. So it's democratic in that it quite literally delivers power to the people. It essentially opens up participation in the public sphere.